The first full day of the Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour is now in the books. This morning, the scouting teams depart from Indiana in the eastern Corn Belt and Grand Island, Nebraska in the western Corn Belt. This morning, scouts of the eastern leg will start in Fishers, Indiana and head west into central Illinois. Recapping the first day of the tour, the eastern Corn Belt teams traveled through western Ohio, where they saw plenty of evidence of the wet, slow spring. Since the beginning of this growing season, we saw the planting problems mount in much of Ohio. AgWeb editor Greg Vincent says if there's not a late frost, this Ohio crop is in trouble.
The story in Ohio all year has been the lateness of this crop. Following a very delayed planting season, farmers have been playing catch-up all summer.
They look good if they were a month earlier. A lot of variation. The corn primarily, I'd say, is in the roast near stage. Seen some that's just barely blistered, some it's barely dented.
We're seeing conditions here that are not normal for mid-August.
Obviously they had some issues with the early season rains and the wetness, and it delayed their plantings. So we're going to see some crops early on, especially today, that are a lot less far along in terms of the maturity process than what we'll get into as we get into days 2, 3, and 4 of this tour.
As we move west on the 2011 Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour, we'll likely see a lot more development to this crop, and we'll get a true judge of the true yield potential.
The crops are not nearly as mature, and that's one of the biggest issues. There's been a lot more moisture in the ground. You know, these crops are behind, but there's still lots of moisture. These crops, you could tell that a lot of them were planted late. We're seeing uneven stands and that type of thing. That's not an issue that we have. Our corn, for the most part, was planted real timely, and so there's just a huge difference in maturity is probably the largest thing we're seeing.
It's obviously been a difficult year for farmers here in Ohio, and with anything less than a late frost, their troubles will only be compounded.
I'm from this local area about 20 miles from here, and September 25th is our normal frost date. So hopefully we get an October 15th frost date. If we get a September 15th frost date, it'll be disaster in this area.
Near Kenton, Ohio, this is Greg Vincent reporting.
Thanks, Greg. In the western Corn Belt, the teams will head out this morning from Grand Island. Yesterday, the tour took them through southeast South Dakota and into Nebraska. Pro Farmer editor Chip Flory says the big question is, can the western Corn Belt bushels make up for the losses in the east?
Is the western Corn Belt corn crop good enough to offset some of the losses over in the eastern Corn Belt? And what I saw on my route on the easternmost edge of the western crop tour is the answer might be yes. We saw some really good cornfields, some really good yield potential in the corn crop there. Better than last year, better than the 3-year average on my route in South Dakota. Big change from a year ago on the corn crop. It's got water this year just like it did a year ago. It's got plant health just like it did a year ago. The big difference is an increase in population on my route. The increase in ear counts is something that has the potential to push that South Dakota corn yield over the top this year. So reporting from the western leg of the Pro Farmer Midwest Crop Tour, I'm Chip Flory.